All right, folks on Zoom, you can hear me. Just give me a thumbs up. Yeah, good. Okay. All right. Maybe, yeah, we'll close that door. Whoa. Okay, Heidi, can you leave one set on though, please? Because I have notes. Oh, well, I guess that's it. Is that all right? Can people see okay? Yeah, good. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Kathryn Arbour. I'm the CEO of Imagine. And it's such a great honor to be with you this afternoon. We have a handful of you in this room. There's a number of folks on Zoom. And apart from the little dinging that keeps happening every time somebody joins Zoom, which I think is just a phenomenon of Zoom here, I think we're ready to roll. Next slide. Well, I can tell you a little bit about why we're here today while we're getting our screen aligned. There we go. I'm going to tell you a couple of the folks who are in the room. We are lucky to have some members of our executive team with us. Can everyone hear me okay in this room? Yes, okay. And on Zoom, yeah, I got some thumbs up. Excellent. I'll introduce a few of the folks who are part of our executive team. We are lucky to have at least one member of our board. I think someone else will be joining us shortly from our board of directors. We'll talk a little bit about the purpose of today's forum. And of course, the hot topic that's on everyone's mind is case management redesign. And then we'll talk about the future. But a couple of housekeeping things first, if you don't mind my taking a minute, since we have a hybrid scenario here. For people who are on Zoom, we're going to ask you to stay on mute. We do have a couple people who could put you on mute if for some reason, you come off of it. We have some question time saved at the end of the meeting. And I would prefer if we could just have all the questions at once. If you're on Zoom, please put them in the chat because that'll make it a little bit easier for us to monitor. Please remember, this is a public forum, so we're hoping no PHI, protected health information. Please guard your information, personally, and any health information. And we do have our director of client relations here, Jenna Corder. And Jenna will be available for a few minutes after the meeting if there is something very specific to you and your situation. Because again, we will field as many questions as you want, but if it starts to get really very involved and personal, then you can meet with Jenna after and she'll set up a time with you to be sure that we're able to answer your questions. For those on Zoom, we'll be sure to give you Jenna's email address so that same situation, if we're not able to really field the question properly in this forum, we'll be sure that Jenna or someone on her team catches up with you after. All right, well, let's get started. So why are we here today? We have a couple of purposes for the day's meeting. We're going to share some information about Imagine and especially everything that's going on right now, because this is a time of amazing change. Hear your concerns, your questions, and try our very best to answer those questions today. And if not, we promise we will get back to you. Let me just say briefly, the state of Imagine's union, if you will, is positive. In spite of all the changes that are going on and that have been going on for some time, we are steadily moving through every day, delivering services to those who need these services, who want these services. And I tell you, it is an honor for me to be in the midst of a staff, of leadership, of a board, of a community that cares as much as ours does. Do we do everything perfectly? Absolutely not. But overall, I must tell you, with the amount of stuff that's happening around us, people are staying very clear about today and what needs to happen today and tomorrow and the next day. But that said, let's dive in a little bit around case management redesign. Now, I'm going to make a guess that most of you who are either in this room or on Zoom have heard a thing or two about case management redesign. So we're not going to go all the way back to the beginning, other than to say in 2021, Colorado passed a requirement saying you must finally make this change happen, because a federal law was passed in 2014 about conflict-free case management. And Colorado has been sort of pushing, we're the last state to be implementing it. And that was all for good reasons. We don't need to talk about all of that right now. But our mandate is to be sure that we have successfully accomplished the requirements for case management redesign by July 1st, 2024. And there are several initiatives that need to be met through this overarching mandate. We must eliminate any kind of conflict of interest for individuals who receive case management and direct services from the same agency. Simplify access to long-term services and supports. Remove silos so members can more easily navigate and find the right programs and services, and create one access point, one door through which people can enter for all home and community-based services waivers. Obviously, there's tons of information out in the world. We have a page on our website, and I put here the HCPF website because if you haven't found this site yet, it's a really important one. And we do have, or we will have, some flyers for you to take at the end of the session today that have, you know, this address and some FAQs and things. How did that happen? Sorry, if you stopped hearing me for a second, I apparently unmuted myself or muted myself. But the HCPF site will give you a lot of the actual rules and regulations behind it, because of course, we are simply carrying out the mandate, right? So there's lots of pieces of this puzzle we can't control. This house has been a feature for a couple of years. It's hard to read, but I'll tell you the essence. What it's intended to do is to say, you know, there's lots of bits and pieces to your lives, to the lives of your family members, to you, to those receiving services, from Social Security that has to happen, to county departments. But what we're trying to create, or what HCPF, the Health Care Policy and Financing Department of the state, is trying to accomplish with this mandate, is putting all the rest under one roof for case management and care coordination, intake, eligibility, all of the pieces of the puzzle, and then services are on the outside, and you then can pick, as you do today, from an array of providers. So this house is intended to underscore the idea that we're going to try to make it easier to access services, to have all of case management for disabilities together. And this lays out the implementation timeline. In December of 22, HCPF released the RFP. What they said is the community center boards that have been around for a long time, 20 of them, that was kind of moving off to the side, and there would be new entities, case management agencies. And they were going to put out a request for proposal, and they had eligibility requirements for you to participate. And we'll tell you a little bit about this, but Imagine joined up with the single entry point that oversees all of the other disability waivers. And we formed an agreement to put in an RFP together. In February, that was the deadline. June 15th, HCPF sent out letters of award, and we, the combined case management new entity that'll be emerging, won that award. And now we're into the actual transition phases. Imagine is in phase 3. So when you look across this chart, we have the advantage, if you will, of learning from these transitions that are underway right now for our transition, which will take place July 1st, 2024. And then all contracts will be executed by July 1. So let's dig in just a little bit more to tell you how Imagine is addressing this CMRD mandate. The board of directors agreed last year that the name Imagine would stay with the direct service side of our current Imagine, which makes total sense. You know, the service side is what so many people rely on and depend on and connect to. The board also supported the efforts that I was just telling you about to join forces with the single entry point that was responsible for decades for the waivers and other services for people with non-IDD disabilities. So we came together. That company is called Adult Care Management, Inc., ACMI. And we partnered together around that proposal. Our leadership came together in last year as we had many changes. I was brought in last year as well to really further develop this idea of combining the case management operations. We received the award for the CMA. The service areas have been slightly redefined. We still will be responsible as Service Area 8 for Boulder, Broomfield, and Gilpin counties. ACMI has already been serving Gilpin County for many, many years. So we can learn from our joining together with them about Gilpin County and what some of the particular needs may be there. And we're in the process of starting that education process. And again, we're in transition 3. So we will go live with a new contract for the case management services on July 1st. What will also happen simultaneously is the service side will separate from Imagine, and Imagine will stand alone. The PASA, the service agency will stand alone as its own PASA and its own set of services. By the way, no interruption of services is part of this deal. So we are committing ourselves to make this as smooth and with the least amount of disruption as possible. And furthermore, you already can keep the service side. You already have your services lined up. Nothing changes with those. So how are we organized today? So the case management side has two separate organizations, ACMI, and you can see the waivers they're responsible for and the services. Can you see that all right? I don't think I need to read through that. And you can see, imagine, we have a host of waivers and state-supported services that come through. And all of that is housed currently, and imagine, under our case management and care coordination team. And all of that will stay, all of ACMI will stay, and it will come together under one roof. We're currently calling that entity, just for the sake of ease at the moment, until we find a new name, A&I. Well, isn't that clever? We took the A from ACMI, the I from Imagine. We are in the process of doing a naming strategy, and pretty soon we will have a new name for the case management agency, and we will share that widely once that's complete. All right, let's move on. This shows just all of that under one house. All right, next. So this is a fairly busy slide, and I won't read every bullet, but we did, this work's been underway for some time, right? And a lot of it has been behind the scenes. More of it's becoming more forward facing, but I will just highlight a couple of these that are really important. Again, bullet number 3, we've already formed a subcommittee that has members of the board from ACMI and members from our board. This subcommittee will, over the next few weeks, have a little bit of a refresh. It's been in place since the beginning of the year, because now board members are selecting where they might best fit for the future. Because right now we have a single board, ACMI has a single board, and now folks are saying, gee, my heart is really over here, or my talents can really be used best here. But this subcommittee has helped to guide me and the executive director of ACMI through these months as we've been moving the needle slowly toward the development of a new case management agency. Bullet number 4, we did a culture survey, which was fantastic. We want the case management employees from both agencies to identify what's important to them about the cultures they're part of. How can we retain some of the best of all that when we come together? So we've begun to have joint meetings as a full team. We're talking about how we can preserve the DNA of our histories. ACMI has been around for 30+ years. We've been around for 60 years. We have no intention of forgetting our roots, but how do you preserve that and still become kind of the new case management agency of the future? So a lot of work is being done on that. And the last bullet just underscores that we have a huge project plan and lots of other milestones over these next 8 months. And we'd like to share some of them with you now, just to get you grounded. So the next couple of slides will outline chunks of time, and what kind of work we're doing in that time. So during this fall, we are really focusing a lot on still behind the scenes things, but we did have a move already with our ACI partners. They've moved to the Dixon building. There's been a decision that the Dixon location will be the headquarters for the new CMA, the new Case Management Agency. And this building, Coal Creek, will remain the headquarters for the PASA, for Imagine. So some of the folks have started to move in to the Dixon location. We've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. There's a mandate from HCPF that the new Case Management Agency will need to have one case manager for 65 clients. Now, those of you familiar with Imagine will know that's a higher ratio than we have today. For clients who've been part of ACMI, it's a smaller ratio. So there's work to do, right? There's work to do to be sure we can achieve this. And there's some guidelines coming out from HCPF. We have our team of very expert case management leaders on both sides who are really tackling this issue to say, how can we do this in the best way possible? So a lot of that work is happening right now. We are, again, trying to strengthen our boards of directors to come together in subcommittees so they'll be ready to launch when the contract is signed as a new board. The PASA board will form a subcommittee to do similar work so that changing bylaws a little bit, tweaking them, any of the legal matters that have to be done that need board pieces, we'll start to divide our board into the experts, even though our board will continue to function as a whole board, of course, until the day of the separation. And there's discussions going on about leadership structures, what the organizational structures will look like. And we've begun stakeholder communications. Again, those of you receiving services, case management services have already probably received a letter from us and from HCPF. This is part of the community conversations. We will have 3 or 4 more town hall meetings over these next 8 months, and we'll put that schedule out shortly. So a lot of preparatory work still happening between now and the end of this year. But once we get into January, obviously things start to really heat up. All the background work that we're doing now about systems and policies and infrastructure, because again, make no mistake, we're talking about all that now, but that work starts to move to the forefront. Start to see changes internally. One big one is where we will be switching HR systems to partner with a professional employer organization who has a state-of-the-art HR system that is going to help us enormously get a lot of things cleaned up that have been kind of bogging us down from an HR perspective. So that work will start to happen officially in January, even though we're laying groundwork right now. Same with IT and accounting systems. Part of this new mandate says you can no longer share these infrastructure pieces. You must have separate. So that's a lot of work because right now, you know, we're able to leverage talent and money and systems when you're one organization. So we're doing a lot of work to figure out how do we separate those things to still have the best kind of support that the PASA needs and that the CMA will need, the Case Management Agency will need. And then other physical moves will start to happen. We have some folks in the Dixon building who will need to begin to migrate over here. This building will need some changes. we'll have to do a little bit of sorting over in Dixon to accommodate people coming and going from the ACMI case management team. We will continue communicating. As I say, we'll have a series of town halls. We'll have a series of emails. Our webpage, again, if you haven't really checked it out, go under the About section. And it's called Imagine and CMRD, and it's chock full. We try to keep it fresh. We have questions and answers in there. Any new information we post. So please think about that as a resource, in addition to talking to your case managers, to talking to us, and in these public forums. All right, then we head to spring. And spring, HCPF has a lot planned for each of the transition phases. So in March, our time becomes HCPF's time. They have a very tight series of detailed transition steps about client, any kind of client activity, so that hopefully no one falls through any cracks. If there are requests for people to move whatever case management agency they're assigned to, we can then work with you at that point, because there's new service areas. So there will be some changes that HCPF assumes will happen. But of course, as a person-centered initiative, they are saying there'll be exception policies, and we will, of course, provide a lot more information about that as our transition comes closer. Structure, will start to really see and hear about some of the organizational changes that might be happening, leadership positions. Again, the good news is for both the PASA and the case management agency, on the ground, we're not seeing anything that would change individuals, in the sense of there's not going to be layoffs, where we need everybody to continue to deliver services and to deliver case management care coordination. Now, what happens as case managers come together and we start doing cross training? Some of those bits and pieces will have a few changes. We don't know what they are yet, and as soon as we do, we will share those with you. But the idea is, when you come in the door for case management services, whether you're asking about IDD, whether you're asking about a physical disability, there's going to be a team who's going to be able to answer your questions and point you exactly in the right direction. So again, those are the details that we are working on right now to be sure that there's a smooth operation. So even though it's going to look different and the name of the case management agency will be different, our hope is there's going to be a comfort and a care mindset, that, and a high quality mindset, that instantly will give you some reassurance that, okay, in spite of all this, my day-to-day isn't going to be all crazy, because we know life is hard enough, and we certainly don't want to be adding to that. And then just some of the details. There'll be new signage for this building, and there'll be different kinds of clarity about this building and signage and whatnot. So I'm going to pause, because that's kind of the information pieces, the parts that we're trying to put out to you. But obviously, we know you came here today probably with your own questions, with things that don't seem to add up or make sense, or maybe that you're really excited about. So what I would like to do, and I have some help here, and I'll be able to in a minute. I want to be sure you get this information if you need it, because I'm going to unplug this thing so that we can talk to each other. We can look at the chat. Although, did we want the ability to be able to have everybody on Zoom show all their faces show? I forgot. We did some practice yesterday and I forgot what we said about that. Oh, right there. Okay. So let's do that. And then the chat is kind of visible to everyone so no questions have come through on the chat. How about in this room? I will repeat questions so people on Zoom can hear it and vice versa. Yes, ma'am.
I didn't quite understand all that you said about the March to June slide and about assigning something, and if you don't like who you were assigned to, we'll change that. I don't understand that. As Mr. Mom with the kid and visit a host home, does that affect me?
No, no change.
Great.
It's the case management piece. So do you have case management services through Imagine? Yeah. Should be exactly the same.
Okay.
Where this is going to have an impact.
Where does your child live? Border over Hill County? He lives in Longmont. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So the question was, how does this affect people in a host home or in services? And again, theoretically, nothing changes about your service. It's your case management agency. HCPF is sorting because they've redefined the service areas. They're sorting people by geography. So the letter that you may have received that went out from HCPF was designed to sort of put people in a geography. So if you got a letter, let's say, and you happen to live in Weld, but we've been giving you services, your letter says, oh, here's your new case management agency, and it's not us. It's the one that's been named to cover Weld. Now, you may say, no way, man, I want to stick with the people I know, and there will be a provision for that. So HCPF is trying to put people in the geographies where, according to their map, you would belong. But obviously, they understand there's long-standing relationships and commitments. The case management agency that is transitioning, and for us in Chapter 3, which will start in March, that's when we'll be able to actually entertain requests from people who are already part of our case management, but who may have gotten this letter saying, oh, you're going to have to move somewhere. They're trying not to have us all in the mix right now. They're trying to do a transition at a time. So just stay in touch with your case manager around anything that feels confusing about any communications you get from HCPF, because soon, we're going to be doing a few more to try and clarify that. But services, still your choice. No expected changes at all for you with your service providers. Yeah, Patty.
So from my experience, managing case managers that had a caseload of like 30 to 40 clients, going to 65 makes me wonder, how are they going to be able to do that? How is HCPF working with you all, looking at you, Jenna, to help figure out so that they don't all burn out when they already are burned out? And it kind of shocks me. And how will that affect the clients? Because quarterly visits, since COVID, they're just starting to come back in person. Having eyeballs on people is really important. So I'm just trying to understand what that's going to look like.
So let me repeat the sort of essence of the question comment from our attendees at our meeting today. And it's regarding that ratio that I mentioned, 1 one case manager to 65 clients. So there's a lot of debate and discussion going on, as you might imagine. So we don't have an exact answer to give you today, other than we're all committed, and HCPF has underscored this. We are all committed to quality, to being sure there's expertise, to being sure that in-person visits, you know, because the expectation is they begin again. What I think the ultimate goal might be is having cross-training eventually. So people are comfortable, right? So if you have a client who has, you know, who has a physical disability and is on one of those waivers, but might want to move to an IDD waiver, maybe that same case manager will eventually have the ability to be able to make that an easy transition. Clearly, we all agree that's not going to be the case out of the gate. So our team is actually putting all of this together. Like, what will it look like the first day of the transition? And it might look very close to how it is today. Then what might it look like in 6 months from now? What could it look like 2 years from now? HCPF has said they will have conversations with us when we come back, because it's inevitable. We will come back and say, hey, we think we have to have a smaller ratio. Now, they haven't ruled out a smaller ratio. P.S. They just put out a new memo last week that said, well, up to. So what they're really discouraging are bigger caseloads, which of course have been more common on the single entry point. So they're not telling us we can't go in initially with a slightly different look and feel. They just want to know about it. So I think the folks who probably are going to have an interesting time are our SEP folks, because they need to have additional work if they're not going to have as high. Theirs is like 1 to 95 right now. So that's in some ways some of the work that Jenna and her colleagues at ACMI are working on, is how else can they come up to speed to be perhaps more of an assistance on our side. But believe me, these concerns are very front and center, Patty, and we are keeping them alive. We're having those conversations. But we were very happy to see in writing that we can go under that 1 to 65. The key will be, how do you do that financially and sustainably? You know, all of the things that you have to do when you're running a business, but we have the right people who are thinking that through. And please know, we will share with you know, you, the community at large, as this starts to take shape, and as we have additional town hall meetings, we'll be able to give you more examples, and have, you know, hopefully more of the team will start to also be present to talk about their experiences. Yes, sir.
Hi there, a couple quick questions. Are there any plans for returning to office as opposed to work from home for the Dixon location and for case management? I just know I miss how effective the face-to-face meetings were in some of those. And the second question is, will case management, I've heard some rumblings, will be taking over some additional responsibilities that HCPF is currently doing. And if so, how does that impact your span of control of 65 to 1?
Mm-hmm.
Is that true that case management will now have some more responsibility in terms of assessments, tier levels, needs of support, things that traditionally are assessed by HCPF?
Mm-hmm. All right, so let me repeat. We'll do one question at a time. There were a couple questions. So the first question from our audience here is, what about this return to people being in the office? Are we planning to do, is there a bigger expectation for that? And part of that question also involves face-to-face contact, right? So you may have heard us reference, HCPF has put back in place a person-to-person, in home, in face-to-face is the word I keep looking for, face-to-face contact. What they're doing is they're starting with 2, is that correct? And then who knows, it will probably grow, but initially they're requiring 2 over the course of a year. So there'll be an initial assessment that must be done in person, and they're requiring then a quarterly monitoring in person. It's not to say there can't be other ones that will be a discussion point between a family and a case manager, right? But those are the 2 that will be required as part of this getting back on the horse again with face-to-face. As far as our teams, we're trying to walk a very fine line between what we still call the hybrid model, right? We are encouraging people to come together. So, for example, Jenna has put together regular team meetings where people have to come in, have to be part of the greater collective, and on those days can also schedule other meetings to be sure that there's opportunity for families and other individuals to have face-to-face if they want it. The single entry point folks have been really working remotely for many years. So this is this will be sort of a different approach. Again, we're not going to be heavy-handed at first. We don't want everybody to quit because, we need everybody. But we are going to try to achieve a nice balance of time in the office, time away. And we expect, as we're building these teams together, we're going to try to get into a nice rhythm. But to say that we're doing an expectation, you have to be here every day, we're not going there. I don't know that we can actually ever go back to that place, but we will have, certain expectations about being sure that the opportunity for face-to-face meetings exists and has enough of a robust commitment to it. All right. The second question was about, there's been some talk that HCPF is shifting some of what it used to do onto the case management agencies. And I'm looking at Jenna to help me with this one. She's actually going to come up here right now and tell you a little bit about some of those details. Oh, you could stand. I have a little stool. You're wondering why I'm not actually as tall as I just looked.
So to answer your question about additional requirements, as of right now, no, we have not received any notice that we're going to be doing things HCPF used to do. There will be a change around next July, however, with the assessments that we do. So right now, some of you are familiar with the term 100.2. That's the eligibility assessment we do when we enroll someone, and then every year, usually before their IP meeting. That assessment is going to change. It's going to be called something else, and it's going to be a standard assessment for everyone in the 10 waivers. So we're going to standardize that, which is great. It's also going to be longer. So the 100.2 is pretty brief right now. Every year it might take us 15 or 30 minutes. In the future, it'll take us a longer period of time, but we're not there yet. That's to come probably next July.
So service level reviews will continue to be facilitated by HCPF?
So support level reviews will continue to be reviewed and approved or denied by HCPF. The case manager's responsibility is once a year for folks that have that in place, send that information to make sure the support level can stay where it's at.
Thanks, Jenna. So we do have some comments anyway on the chat. Okay, so it looks like the first question on the chat regarding HICPUF catchment area, will individuals that are applying for case management, new applicants, be allowed to choose Imagine if they are in the Weld catchment area?
I'll notice Jen has been answering that.
Oh, excellent. I was going to read that answer then. You'll let your case manager know, just in case people can't read that, that you want to stay with Imagine. So this would be, so I guess it would be the same for new players, right? Yeah. They've been working so much on current members that they haven't given a lot of scenarios about brand new members, but I think it would function very similarly. If you live in a place and you're like, but that's where I want to be, then you reach out and there will be dialogues that happen between the case management agencies. Yeah, there is a question of reasonable distance, right? Because there will be expectations for in-person meetings. Obviously, we want to make it doable and manageable for all parties. So there may be some situations if you live in a very distant part of the state where we may have to say that's just not practical. We're not going to be able to assign someone to you to be able to get there with any kind of regularity. But case by case, right? We will take a close look at all of those circumstances. We have another question in the room.
Maybe this is getting to be too individual, but as my adult son's guardian, is this based on my address, which is in Weld County, versus where he lives in Longmont, which is in Boulder County? So are these two things based on?
It's the
my
client.
address as
It's your
guardian?
it's your son.
It's the client.
It's the client. Mhm.
Their relation.
All right. Great news. Reach out. Great. Okay. What else can we answer? What other things are on your mind? We have a few. Yeah, we're doing pretty great on time. We have to wrap up about 5:30. But again, Jenna will be here if there's some specific question that you would like her to help, you sort through. We do have a board meeting at 6 o'clock. So in this room, so we will be transitioning our space between 5:30 and 6. I also do want to introduce a board member who joined us, Don Brown. He's the chair of our Imagine board. And Heidi Storrs is a member of our board of directors as well. So thank you both for being here. If you have questions for them, feel free.
I don't have questions for them, but I am going to ask them questions.
Please, please.
I know that this is not the focus of today's meeting, but you mentioned having other forums.
Yes.
I would respectfully request that one be about standing up the PASA and helping us all understand what that's going to look like.
Absolutely.
I know that you don't have time to go into that today.
We can absolutely put that into one of our town halls, and we again we will be talking about that broadly on our webpage as well. But absolutely, I think the short answer is it's going to look very similar to the way it looks today, probably identical. The big difference is behind the scenes, of course, how looks like somebody just came off mute. So there's a little bit of feedback going on. Oh, thanks, Lori. Behind the scenes, obviously, what the building's going to look like, how some of the money's going to be sorted, how we serve HR needs. Those things obviously have to look different so the PASA can stand by itself and be a sustainable organization. But we had a subcommittee of the board that worked with me and Stephen Shaughnessy, who's our Chief Services Officer, Robin Gray, who's our CFO, COO, worked closely with us, this board committee, to dig deeply and say, how do each of these programs work? How feasible is it that this package, this array of programs can stay together and stand by itself. And the good news was, after a number of months of really diving deep, over 200 hours are these board members dedicated, and our staff dedicated to this project, so that the decision would be an informed one, that we don't want to set this PASA out there with any danger of it not succeeding. So sure, is it going to be a stretch? Are we going to have to all hunker down and put all our best efforts, continue fundraising, be sure Boulder County continues to fund? Absolutely. And the good news is it's going to look and feel very much like it does today, with the people, the great people, some of whom are here tonight. Thank you for coming, who every day show up and ensure that these programs go. But absolutely, we will dedicate some time for other questions about that. What else? Any other questions? All right. Well, I can just tell you at a big level, we're hoping to have town hall meetings in December. We're going to work with our board to finalize the dates tonight, or at least the first set of dates. And then we will publicize those. I think what we will do next time is have an in-person separate and a Zoom separate, so that, again, we're not trying to navigate some of the technical pieces that happen when we all try to come together. As lovely as it is, I do think that'll give people a real option. So, and we'll schedule them for times of day at the end of a workday, so that, you know, the larger percentage of all of you can attend. Thanks so much for everything you do, for your support, for coming tonight, either on Zoom or here in this room. It means so very much to us. And please feel free to reach out to me at any time. I have some cards here if you want to have a card. I know Jenna and her team are always available. We are committed. This is a huge time of change, and we are committed to trying to make it as seamless and without drama as we possibly can. And we appreciate our staff for helping us with that, and thank you for everything you do. All right, well, good evening, have a good night, and thanks again. Cindy has some handouts, so
I'll be back at the door.
she has some by the door, and I'll put